Let one of those kids hang. How's that gonna look? Niggers or not, they're children, and we got a job to do. Hang one of us. They were talking about hanging one of my friends, or maybe even me. My knees were shaking so badly I thought I would fall over. I held my breath, trying not to make any noise. The two men discussing our fate were just on the other side of the door. I turned my back to the partially open door, at the same time moving closer to it so I could hear more. I tried to look unconcerned so as not to frighten the others. Already some of them were crying, and Thelma's face was blue. I moved even closer to hear a man's voice say, "They're children. What do we do? Have them draw straws to see which one gets a rope around their neck. It may be the only way out. There must be 1,000 people out there, armed and coming this way. Some of these patrolmen are throwing down their badges," another breathless voice said. "We gotta get them out of here." I heard footsteps coming closer. I moved to the center of the room, closer to where my friend stood surrounding Thelma, who sat on her haunches. A tall, raw-boned, dark-haired man came toward us. "I'm Gene Smith, Assistant Chief of the Little Rock Police Department." He spoke in a calm tone. "It's time for you to leave for today. Come with me, now." Right away, I had a good feeling about him because of the way he introduced himself and took charge. He urged us to move faster, acting as though it mattered to him whether or not we got out. "It's 11:30. I want you out of here before noon, Gene Smith." His was the voice I had heard in the next room, saying he would rather get all of us out than hang one to save the others. I had decided to forever remember this man in my prayers. I scrambled to keep up with the others as we moved at a quick pace toward the 14th Street side of Central High. It was almost a block away, but suddenly Smith and the other men turned from the main hallway and began descending stairs into passageways that became more and more dim. What if they were going to kill us? I didn't really know these men, yet I had no choice but to trust them. I focused on speeding down the narrow concrete passageway, down the stairs into a dark cellar, where one of the men walking ahead of us switched on a flashlight. We were inside some kind of basement garage. In the distance was a huge door that appeared to lift upward with chain pulleys. It resembled a loading dock of some kind. 2 cars were sitting with engines running, lights on, hoods pointing toward the door. "Hurry, now, get in," Smith said, as he held open one of the doors. I looked at the others getting into the second car. Thelma, Minna Jean, and Ernie were in the car with me. A white man sat behind the wheel. He had an absolutely terrified expression on his face and was busy looking all around us, his eyes darting back and forth. "Roll your windows up, lock your doors, keep your faces away from the windows. Put your heads down when we start to move." His voice quivered. He hunched over to secure something on the floor, and that's when I saw the gun strapped to his side in a leather holster. Smith leaned down to talk through the open window to the driver. "Move fast and don't stop no matter what." Then he looked at us and said, "Listen to your driver's instructions and do exactly what he says. Your lives depend on it." We were surrounded by white men in suits speaking in frightened tones. Their expressions told me we were in the kind of trouble I hadn't even imagined before. The enormous roaring sound coming from the crowd just beyond the door made me wonder whether or not they had waited too long to get us into these cars. Just for one instant, I tried to imagine what would happen if the mob got hold of us. "Now," Smith shouted. "Let ear roll." The driver shifted gears and gunned the engine as I crouched down in the back seat. Suddenly I heard the loud sound of what must have been a heavy chain, dragging. The door was opening, letting streaks of sunlight in. I scooted farther down in my seat, hiding my face. But I decided I had to keep my eyes open. I wanted to know what was happening to me. At least that way I'd know what to pray for. I felt the car surge ahead. We were climbing upward, out of the basement toward bright sunlight. I could hear the tires spin onto a gravel driveway just beyond the door. The car gained momentum, lunging forward. As the full light of day crept into the windows, the deafening noise of the mob engulfed us. "Get the niggers. Hang those niggers. Stop those cars," I heard somebody shout. Then I saw wave after wave of white faces, angry white faces, everywhere. Their mouths were open, shouting threats. Clusters of white hands with fingers extended seemed for a moment to envelop us, clutching, grabbing at us. Some of the faces were moving along with us, coming closer to the car windows. "Hold on and keep your heads down," the driver shouted. I heard the engine grind and felt us go faster. The people running beside us accelerated their pace, hurling rocks and sticks at the car. Why, that's when the car really began moving fast, faster than I'd ever ridden before. Finally, there were fewer hands and faces on the car windows. The noises were subsiding. I took a deep breath. "Y'all can sit up now, but keep an eye out." I could see that the others in the car behind us were safe. We were mostly silent on our journey, craning our necks, keeping watch in every direction. "Thank you for the ride home," I said to the driver as I climbed out of the car. He cast a pleasant but impatient glance my way. I wanted to say, "Thanks for risking your life to save mine," but I didn't know how it would sound to the others. It was an awkward moment with a stranger, a decent white man. "Get in the house now, go," he said, pausing for an instant, then gunning his engine and pulling away. I waved goodbye to my friends. Standing at the curb for a moment, I peered after the car as it drove away, wondering if he would get into trouble with the segregationists when they found out he was the one who rescued us from the mob. He was the second white man I would pray for God to protect. I turned to see that some of my neighbors had gathered, a few sitting in our lawn chairs, a few standing around talking. I wondered what they were doing there. Then Grandma India rushed out the front door, her arms open to receive me. "Thank God you're safe. Your mama is on her way home." She was shoving me, both her hands at my back, not letting me pause to say hello to the alarmed neighbors who kept asking if I was all right. "Now you've had your lesson. You don't have to go back to that awful school anymore," our neighbor Mrs. Floyd said, as Grandma ushered me past her. I settled down on the couch in front of the television with the radio blasting loud from the hallway. I sipped the grape soda Grandma had given me and thought about what the mob might have done to us. I worried that they would come looking for us at our homes. Although we had left shortly after noon, word came that the mob continued its rampage. Even after the Central High School registrar came out to announce on a microphone that we had been removed, not everyone believed her. Instead, they surged forward, threatening to overrun the barricades and the police, demanding to see for themselves that only white students remained. A police official convinced them to send representatives inside the school to check. When 3 women returned to report we were not there, the mob cheered but continued the Siege. Armed with guns, ropes, and clubs, the report said, they surged toward the school, in the doors and through the halls, dancing and shouting, 2, 4, 6, 8, we ain't gonna integrate. Melba. Where's Melba? Is she all right? Mother Lois came rushing into the living room, disheveled and frantic. I got here as soon as I could. Those newsmen said you were trapped by the mob. I'm fine, Mama. I stood to embrace her. We've made a mistake. You're definitely not going back to that school. What's that on your knee? Grandma India asked. I fell. I decided I didn't need to add to Mother's nervousness. I would wait until she calmed down to explain the details of my day. I heard they passed the hat and collected $140 to encourage those policemen to abandon their duties. Grandma added. You must have been scared to death. I'm sorry, Mother said. We all listened as the newscast continued airing sounds of the angry mob taking over the school. I discovered that one. Reason we were able to slip into the school that morning was that the mob had been preoccupied chasing and beating 3 black reporters, James Hicks, Alex Wilson, and Moses Newsom, whom they had accused of purposely distracting the crowd in order to allow us time to get in the side door. Mr. Wilson was hit on the head with a brick, and even as he lay wounded on the ground, they continued to kick and beat him. The mob had then turned to beat up white reporters. Several members of the Life magazine staff were beaten. Other news people and out-of-towners were chased and beaten until they reached police lines. Even after they were inside police cars, they were showered with rocks. A concerned and flustered Conrad rushed into the house to greet me. His friend Clark had told him I was dead. In order to settle him down, Grandma busied him with helping her fix lunch. I remained glued to the news, mulling over whether or not I should tell them what really happened to me that day. I decided it would only make things worse, and maybe it would make them decide I could never go back to the integration. Later on, we got hold of a copy of the evening newspaper, the Arkansas Democrat. The headlines read, Growing Violence Forces Withdrawal of Negro Students at Central High. Crowds yell touches off brutal beating. These pictures are enough to curdle your blood, Grandma said, pointing to the one of reporter Alex Wilson being beaten. There was another showing a white man riding on him piggyback. The paper was filled with pictures of the crowd and the police trying desperately to control it. Only by looking at those pictures did I begin to understand the real danger of that mob. In my diary I wrote, there seems to be no space for me at Central High. I don't want integration to be like the merry-go-round. Please, God, make space for me. The phone started to ring nonstop with calls from angry strangers spewing hatred and threats. There were also calls from our family and friends inquiring about my safety and warning us that the mob was continuing to search out and beat up people in our neighborhood. One phone call came from a news reporter who asked what I felt about the situation. Before Mother or Grandma caught on to what I was doing, I told him. He complimented me, saying I was articulate, and asked if I could write. I said yes, and he asked if I would write an article about my first morning at Central. Right there I just jotted down a few notes and started dictating the article to him as it came into my head, the way I wrote letters to God every night in my diary. All the while I was talking to the reporter, I kept our instructions in mind. Accentuate the positive, don't complain too much. He said my story would appear in newspapers everywhere, just as I had written it, because it was on the Associated Press wire. Sure enough, the next day I saw it on the front page. Would you have exchanged places with me and entered Central as I did this morning? I went, and I am glad. Previous to making actual entrance into Central, I had feelings that I'm sure have never been experienced by a child of 15 years. Sensations of courage, fear, and challenge haunted me. With the morning came my definite decision. I must go. The Lord is my strength and my shield. My heart trusted in him, and I am helped. With this verse in mind, and a hopeful prayer in my heart, I entered the halls of Central High. The spacious halls brought again the school feeling. However, the atmosphere was not conducive to study but one of uneasiness. The sea of faces represented no special personality to me. Although some were kind, many showed contempt, especially some boys gathered in the halls. I was beginning to believe that the long, hard fight was over, that finally this American way of life was going to pay off. As I walked through the halls alone, it seemed as if I were lost on an island of strange people, having no way of communicating with them. I longed to tell them, I won't hurt you, honest, give me a chance. Come on, how about it? I'm an average teenager, just like yourself, with the same aspirations and heartaches. But it was useless. Only a few facial expressions told me I had gotten through. Each time as I was about to give up, exhausted from the jeers and insulting remarks, some kind face would come up and say, I want you here or you're pretty or won't. You stay and fight it out. This above all made all the go home, nigger, and I'm gonna get you before the day is over faded into the background. There were a few trying experiences such as being blocked from passage to class by a few rough, tough-looking side burners, boys who I'm sure if separated would not attack a mouse. Then, there were the 3 women who jumped the fence and attempted to get me. A favorite activity of the kids was to form a group in a circle and scream, 2, 4, 6, 8, we ain't gonna integrate. I know of no physical injury to any of the 9 students. I was slapped by one girl. I turned and said thank you and continued on my journey to class. I did not realize the size or the intentions of the crowd outside until I was told for my safety I had to leave Central High. This hurt me deeper than I can ever express. I'm glad I went. Oh, so glad I went. For now I know without out of school interference integration is possible in Little Rock, Arkansas. When I finished the article I realized it was not the whole truth, but a version that wouldn't jeopardize the integration. If I had told what really happened, one of the officials might say we couldn't go back. I composed the story in a way that would make my day sound okay. Maybe in a few days if I remained patient and prayed it would really be that way, white students would welcome me and smile and treat me like an ordinary human being. All that evening we continued our vigilance on the couch in front of the television. Mother seemed to relax a bit, and Grandma settled down with her almanac and handiwork. The newsmen reported more roving gangs of hooligans doing their evil deeds throughout the city. From his Sea Island, Georgia, retreat, Governor Faubus urged our leaders and school officials to allow a cooling-off period before resuming integration. President Eisenhower had earlier complimented us on our bravery in a radio message, saying all parents must have sympathetic understanding for the ordeal to which we 9 children had been subjected. Now he issued a warning statement. I want to make several things very clear in connection with the disgraceful occurrences today at Central High School in the city of Little Rock. I will use the full power of the United States, including whatever force may be necessary, to prevent any obstruction of the law and to carry out the orders of the federal court. He ended his long statement by demanding that all persons engaged in obstruction of justice cease and desist. At least we've got a president who respects the law, Grandma said, applauding. There will be no school for you tomorrow, Melba, Mother Lois said. But I'm going to school tomorrow, aren't I? Conrad asked. Perhaps. We'll have to see how things go, Mother Lois said. I'll bet that mob will heed the president's words, Grandma said. Things will be back to normal tomorrow. But this time Grandma was wrong. After a restless night, we awoke on Tuesday to find the mob had not heeded the warning of the president. As early as 7:30 a.m., more than 200 people had gathered in front of Central High to protest our arrival. The headlines read, Ike clears way to send troops. Command cease and desist in legal move of Arkansas Gazette, September 24, 1957. The article said that President Eisenhower signed a history-making proclamation, clearing the way for possible use of federal troops to quash any further school integration violence in Little Rock. But next I read, FAUBUS challenges Ike on using troops. From Sea Island, Georgia, on September 23, Governor Faubus had declared that the president couldn't use federal troops to combat the Little Rock integration violence, unless he, as governor, requested him to do so. And he added, I don't plan to make any such request. And even as I read those headlines, the announcer on the radio said the unruly crowd surrounding Central High was larger than it had been the day before.